On a bright Saturday morning, Greenwood Park basked in the sunlight. The gentle hum of children playing, birds chirping, and the rustle of leaves created a peaceful atmosphere. Among the morning joggers was Colonel Angela Carter, a seasoned black military officer known for her resilience and leadership. At 50 years old, Angela carried herself with poise, wearing her grey tracksuit as if it were a badge of honour earned through years of discipline and hard work. Angela jogged through the familiar trails, her mind at ease. The park, with its towering trees and well-maintained paths, had always been her retreat, a place where she could breathe freely, far removed from the pressures of her demanding career. As she rounded a bend, Angela's attention was drawn to an unsettling sight. A young police officer in uniform stood near a trash can, casually holding an empty soda can. He glanced at the bin just a few feet away, then carelessly tossed the can onto the ground. The sound of the aluminum clinking against the gravel broke the serenity of the moment. Angela slowed her pace, her eyes narrowing slightly. This wasn't just litter. It was a display of disregard, amplified by the uniform he wore. She stopped a few feet away, the morning light casting a dignified glow around her. "Excuse me," she began, her tone calm yet firm. "The trash can is right there." The officer, Derek Coleman, a young man of about 30, turned to face her. His sharp features betrayed an air of arrogance, and his badge gleamed in the sunlight. "So?" he replied, his voice dripping with defiance. Angela's expression didn't falter. She pointed slightly toward the trash can. "As an officer of the law, you should set an example." Her words carried the weight of experience and expectation. Coleman smirked, crossing his arms. "Set an example? What are you, the park police? Or just someone who thinks they can boss people around?" Angela met his gaze, unshaken. Her presence alone seemed to challenge him, a quiet but powerful reminder of who she was. Unbeknownst to Coleman, the woman he was mocking was far more than she appeared. Angela Carter wasn't just any jogger. She was a decorated officer who had shattered countless barriers in her career. As the interaction grew tense, Angela's resolve remained unbroken. What Coleman saw as a moment to exert his power would soon unravel into a moment that exposed a deeper, uncomfortable truth, a truth about respect, prejudice, and responsibility. Little did Coleman know, his actions were about to ignite a series of events that would not only challenge his arrogance, but reveal the face of racism and the abuse of authority within the most mundane of encounters. Angela felt a surge of frustration rise within her, but she quickly suppressed it. Over her 25 years of military service, she'd faced far worse challenges. A moment like this, though aggravating, was nothing new. She knew better than to lose control. Calmness was her weapon. "No," she replied, her voice unwavering and low. "I'm not teaching you how to be a police officer, but picking up a can and putting it in the trash isn't too difficult. And it's the right thing to do, especially when you're wearing that uniform." Officer Derek Coleman looked her up and down, his expression dripping with disdain. He crossed, his arms over his chest, his stance one of complete disregard. "Who do you think you are lecturing me? Let me guess, a housewife pretending to be in charge?" Angela's gaze sharpened, but she remained composed. A small smile tugged at the corner of her lips as she tilted her head slightly, her tone as calm as ever. "I'm the one reminding you of your responsibilities. It's necessary, especially when you're neglecting the simplest of duties. Without warning." Coleman took a step forward, his voice now sharp and threatening. "Listen, old lady," he sneered. "I don't have time for a moral lecture from someone like you. Mind your own business." Angela's heart skipped a beat at his words, but she didn't react. Instead, she stood straighter, her posture a silent declaration of dignity. She looked him square in the eye. "I'm not going to argue with you, Officer Coleman," she said, emphasizing his title with a cold finality. "But I want you to think about the image you're projecting, both as a person and as an officer of the law." Coleman let out a bitter laugh, mocking her advice. Do you really think I care about what you think? Don't be so delusional. You're just a middle-aged woman out for a jog. I'm a cop. I do what I want. Angela's shoulders slumped ever so slightly as she sighed, shaking her head in disbelief. You should watch your words, Officer Coleman. I'm not someone you should dismiss like that. But her calm response only fueled Coleman's defiance. His voice dropped, filled with calculated venom. Are you threatening me? A black woman in a cheap suit thinks she can lecture me. Angela held her ground, every ounce of her being still. The words stung, but she had heard worse in her career. Her discipline and years of training prevented her from reacting impulsively. This was not the time to let anger take the wheel. Her response was measured, calm, but powerful. All right, she said, her voice quiet yet authoritative. Let's just leave it at that. But remember, Officer Coleman, respect isn't earned by force. It's earned by action. Angela took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was coming next. I'll be blunt, she said, her voice steady and clear. I'm Colonel Angela Carter, a high-ranking military officer. If you think insulting me is a good idea, you'll soon find out just how wrong you are. Officer Derek Coleman stared at her for a moment, as though processing her words before his lips curled into a mocking grin. Colonel? That's ridiculous, he sneered. An old lady jogging in the park claiming to be an army officer. Are you listening to yourself, or do you expect me to believe that nonsense? Angela didn't respond, her gaze never leaving him. She simply stood tall, her presence unwavering, challenging him silently. Listen, Auntie, Coleman continued with a condescending tone. I told you to get lost before I have to do something I don't want to do. Angela took a step back, her expression turning serious. I advise you to think carefully before you say or do anything, Officer Coleman. You don't want to find yourself in deeper trouble than you can handle. Coleman only laughed, dismissing her words with a wave of his hand. What he failed to realize was that the consequences of his actions were far more serious than he could have imagined. The tension between them grew, drawing the attention of passers-by. A few people stopped, curious to overhear the unfolding argument, but Coleman's fierce eyes and aggressive stance made everyone hesitant. No one dared to intervene. Angela felt the anger rising within her, but she forced it down. She had faced much more difficult situations than being insulted by an arrogant man, but this was different. What bothered her wasn't the personal attack, but the unprofessionalism and racist language coming from a police officer, a figure meant to embody fairness and responsibility. Coleman, still oozing arrogance, took another step toward Angela. You think you're special, huh? He taunted. People like you are all about moralizing and doing nothing. I told you, get lost before I lose my patience. But Angela didn't budge. She stood firm, her calm demeanor unwavering. Officer Coleman, she said in a low, authoritative tone. I'll say this one last time. You are disgracing yourself in the police department. Don't let your arrogance take you too far. Instead of taking her words to heart, Coleman smirked. Honor? You're talking about honor? His laughter was cold, laced with sarcasm. Who are you to lecture me? Some old black woman in a jogging suit thinks she has the right to lecture me? His words were not just offensive, they were deeply racist. The venom in his voice was unmistakable. Several people standing nearby began to whisper among themselves, their discomfort palpable. Angela's heart clenched, but her composure remained intact. She knew that this was no longer just about the litter, or even about him disrespecting her. It was about confronting a bigger issue, one that had persisted far too long. As the confrontation escalated, more and more people began to notice, their phones rising in the air to record the unfolding drama. Though they didn't know the specifics, they could feel the tension, the sense that something was dangerously off. Angela, aware that the situation was spiraling out of control, knew she had to act before it went too far. She could feel the eyes of the crowd on her, but her focus remained sharp. Okay, Coleman, she said, her voice resolute. "You've said enough. I won't let your disrespect continue. This is your last warning." Coleman let out a loud, mocking laugh. To him, her words were nothing more than a joke, but as he looked into her steady eyes, seeing no fear, no hesitation, his demeanor shifted. The mocking expression slowly twisted into one of genuine anger. "Warn me?" he snarled, stepping closer. "Who do you think you are, to warn me? Don't forget, I'm a cop. You're just a regular person. Know your place." Angela's gaze remained unwavering, her calm on the surface hiding the calculated thoughts beneath. She realized talking to someone like Coleman with reason or kindness wasn't going to work. He was too far gone. Before she could respond, however, Coleman suddenly made a move that shocked everyone. With a swift motion, he drew his gun from its holster and aimed it directly at her. The crowd gasped in horror, some retreating in fear, while others frantically continued recording. Angela, however, remained rooted to the spot. Her body stiffened, but her face showed no trace of fear. She had been in far more dangerous situations throughout her military career. But this was different. A police officer, armed and in uniform, had just pulled a weapon over a trivial argument in a public park. It was a line she could not let him cross. Coleman's hand trembled as he gripped the gun, his teeth clenched. "This is my city, and I will not let someone like you order me around." He spat, his finger tightening on the trigger. Angela met his gaze without flinching. Her voice was low, but carried the weight of years of authority and command. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life, Officer Coleman. This action will cost you dearly." Slowly, deliberately, Angela reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her phone. The crowd held its breath, unsure of how Coleman would react to this bold move. But Angela remained unshaken, her movements slow and deliberate. "Don't move!" Coleman yelled, still pointing the gun at her. "I'm just making one phone call," Angela replied, unflinching. "And I advise you to be very careful with what you do next." With calm precision, Angela dialed a number, holding the phone up to her ear. On the other end, the call was answered almost immediately. "Sheriff Dawson?" a deep voice rumbled. "It's me, Angela Carter," she said, her voice clear and firm, the authority of a seasoned officer resonating in her words. "I'm at Greenwood Park, East Corner. One of your officers, a man named Coleman, just pulled a gun on me after making racist and offensive remarks." There was a tense silence on the other end of the line as Sheriff Dawson processed Angela's words. Then, his voice, laced with shock and concern, came through. "Colonel Carter, what are you saying? One of my officers is threatening you with a gun." "I'll be right there." "Wait there." Angela hung up the phone, her eyes never leaving Coleman's. "Sheriff Dawson is on his way," she said, her voice cold and authoritative. "I hope you're ready to explain your actions, Officer Coleman." For a moment, Coleman hesitated, clearly thrown off by her calm and unwavering demeanor. But it didn't take long for him to regain his composure, his arrogance returning. "You think I'm scared?" he scoffed. "Dawson can't hurt me." Angela said nothing. She stood still, her gaze unblinking, making Coleman more confused and agitated than ever. Around them, the crowd started to murmur louder, some attempting to move closer, but hesitating because of the gun in Coleman's hand. The next few minutes felt suffocating, the tension thick in the air. But Angela remained calm. She knew the truth was on her side, and soon, justice would prevail. Then, the unmistakable wail of a police siren pierced the silence, followed by the sound of 2 patrol cars pulling up nearby. The crowd turned to watch as 2 officers stepped out of the vehicles, and among them was Sheriff Dawson, a middle-aged white man, his expression stern and authoritative. He strode toward Angela, and Coleman, his eyes quickly taking in the scene. First, he glanced at the gun in Coleman's hand, then moved his gaze to Angela, who stood unfazed, her composure absolute. "Colonel Carter," Dawson called, his voice respectful and clear. Angela nodded slightly, acknowledging him. "Hello? Dawson. Glad you got here so quickly." Dawson stepped forward, stopping directly in front of Coleman. "Coleman," he said firmly, "what's going on here?" "Put the gun down. Right now." Coleman, caught off guard by Dawson's respectful address of Angela, tried to hide his unease. He stammered slightly, still trying to defend himself. "Sir, she insulted me first. I just wanted to be safe." Dawson's expression grew serious, his voice firm and unwavering. "Safe? You think pointing a gun at an unarmed woman in the middle of a park is safe? Let me be clear. The woman you're threatening is Colonel Angela Carter, a high-ranking officer in the United States military." Dawson's voice cut through the air, calm yet firm. "And I don't need to remind you that your actions have crossed a line." Coleman stood frozen, his face pale as the reality of the situation sank in. His hand trembled, the gun he had once aimed at Angela now shaking uncontrollably. "Colonel, no way. She's just an old woman. I don't know what happened," Coleman stammered, trying to defend himself, but his words faltered in the face of Dawson's authority. "Yes, you don't," Dawson replied coldly. "But that doesn't change the fact that you abused your power, insulted her with racist words, and now you've threatened her life. Drop the gun. Immediately." The weight of Dawson's command and the watchful eyes of the crowd pressing in on him were too much. Reluctantly, Coleman lowered his weapon. One of his colleagues stepped forward, taking the gun from his shaking hand. Angela, standing still and composed as ever, locked eyes with Coleman. "I warned you," she said, her voice unwavering. "But you wouldn't listen. You ruined your own career." Dawson, turning to Angela, looked genuinely regretful. "Colonel Carter, I'm so sorry for my subordinate's actions. It is inexcusable. I assure you, we will take this matter seriously." Angela nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I trust you, Dawson. But today's incident is about more than just one person. It's a lesson in responsibility and ethics that your entire team needs to learn." Dawson turned to face Coleman, his face hardening into a mask of cold disapproval. "Coleman, you are suspended immediately. I will personally submit a report of your conduct to the disciplinary committee, and you should be prepared for criminal charges." Coleman's eyes darted around, his mind racing as he tried to find an excuse. But there was nothing. "Sir, I didn't mean to. I..." Coleman stuttered, his voice cracking. "There is no room for excuses here," Dawson interrupted firmly. "You have not only disgraced yourself, but you've also tarnished the reputation of the entire department. I cannot tolerate that." By now, the crowd around them had grown, many recording the scene, and some even streaming it live on social media. Dawson knew the situation couldn't go on much longer. "Disperse the crowd and take Coleman to headquarters immediately," Dawson ordered one of the accompanying officers. As one of Coleman's colleagues led him away, Coleman's face was a mixture of anger and humiliation. He turned his head to look at Angela, as though he wanted to say something. But under her cold gaze, he only bowed his head in silence. When things began to settle, Dawson turned back to Angela. "Colonel Carter," he asked, "would you like to file a formal complaint? I will make sure this is handled fairly." Angela smiled slightly, but her eyes remained sharp, unfazed. "I'll consider it, Dawson. More importantly, you need to rethink the way you train your officers." Angela's words lingered in the air, her steady gaze never leaving Dawson. "And supervise your team. Coleman isn't a personal problem. He's a symptom of a larger problem." Dawson nodded thoughtfully, absorbing her words. "I see. Thank you for staying calm and handling this situation professionally. Things could have gone a lot worse." Angela scanned the park, noticing that life was returning to normal as people continued with their day. But she knew this incident was far from over. With the spread of social media, Coleman's actions would become a symbol of police abuse and racism. It would be a conversation that would reach far beyond the park. Before leaving, Dawson added, "Angela, I owe you a debt of gratitude, not only for what you did today, but for what you've given to this country. If there's anything I can do to make it up to you, please let me know." Angela smiled but said nothing further. With a firm stride, she walked away, leaving Dawson standing there, deep in thought. In the days that followed, the Greenwood Park incident quickly became headline news. Video footage of the entire encounter went viral, sparking widespread discussions about police conduct, power, and racism. Officer Coleman faced fierce backlash from both the public and his colleagues. He was swiftly fired from the force and faced accusations of intimidation and racist behavior. Chief Dawson, acknowledging the severity of the situation, held a press conference where he publicly apologized to Colonel Angela Carter. He also pledged to initiate internal reforms to prevent such behavior from occurring in the future. While he stressed that Coleman's actions did not represent the entire police force, he also admitted that there was a need for systemic improvement. Despite her reluctance to be the center of attention, Angela agreed to appear in an interview. She shared her thoughts on the importance of equality, responsibility, and the need for individuals to stand up to injustice. Her words resonated deeply with viewers, encouraging others to think critically about their own actions and the systems they support. As the story wrapped up, the narrator addressed the audience. "Thank you for taking the time to follow the whole story. If you love this content, don't forget to click like, share this story with your friends and family, and especially subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next meaningful stories. Once again, thank you for being with us. See you in the next stories.